A bitter wind swept through the city streets as a young black girl clutched an old paper bag, her last sandwich, offering it to a man shivering on the sidewalk. His ragged coat and hollow stare screamed of hunger and despair. She never imagined that single act of kindness would shatter her world. By sunrise, flashing red and blue lights painted her front yard, and police officers were knocking on her door with accusations that made no sense. Who was this homeless man? And why was her life suddenly in danger for simply showing compassion? Maya was just 16, but she carried herself with a quiet strength that came from growing up in a world that didn't always treat her fairly. She lived with her grandmother in a small, aging apartment complex on the outskirts of town, where the paint peeled from the walls, and the smell of fried food and old carpet filled the halls. Despite their struggles, Maya was known for her kindness, always holding doors for strangers, helping neighbors carry groceries, and sharing whatever little she had. Most mornings she left early for school, headphones in, walking past graffiti-covered bus stops and shuttered storefronts. She worked part-time at a local deli after classes, saving every tip for college. In a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and suspicion toward people like her ran deep, Maya dreamed of a better life, not just for herself, but for her grandmother, who worked tirelessly to keep them afloat. That cold winter night, the city streets were nearly empty, and Maya clutched the brown paper bag containing her dinner as she walked home. She didn't notice at first how dark it had gotten or how the wind cut sharper than usual. She had no idea that someone was watching her, or that this ordinary walk home would soon spiral into something she could never have prepared for. In just a few hours, her simple act of kindness would make her the center of a story that would shake her community, expose deep racial divides, and change her life forever. The man Maya noticed that night barely seemed alive. His beard was overgrown, his coat tattered, his body curled against the icy bricks of a storefront. She hesitated, her breath visible in the frosty air, before kneeling to hand him her sandwich. He didn't speak, just gave a faint nod, his hands trembling as he clutched the bag. Maya offered a small smile, then hurried home, thinking little of it. But the next morning, her world cracked open. Flashing red and blue lights flooded her street, their glare piercing the blinds of her grandmother's apartment. Police officers stood on the porch, their expressions stern, their hands hovering near their holsters. Maya's heart thudded as her grandmother shuffled to the door, confused. The officers pushed inside without warning. They said they were looking for Maya. They said she was wanted for questioning. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering. Maya's chest tightened with fear and confusion. She hadn't done anything wrong, but the officers spoke to her like she was already guilty. One officer's tone was sharp, dismissive. He didn't call her by name, just girl. Another told her to stop resisting when she froze in shock. Her grandmother's pleas went ignored. They claimed she was seen leaving the scene of a crime. They claimed the homeless man she'd fed wasn't homeless at all. According to them, he was a wealthy businessman who had been robbed shortly after their encounter, and somehow Maya was now their suspect. By the time they led her out, neighbors were recording on their phones. Maya's name, her face, and her supposed crime were splashed across local news headlines before she could even explain herself. Social media posts labeled her a thief and dangerous. Her schoolmates whispered behind her back. She went from being invisible to being infamous overnight. But there was something off about the entire situation. The way the officers treated her. Rough, impatient, the way they ignored her grandmother's questions, the way they acted like her guilt was already decided. The more Maya tried to defend herself, the less anyone seemed willing to listen. It didn't matter that she had no history of trouble. It didn't matter that she had been walking home from work, tired and hungry, with no time or energy to commit a crime. It didn't matter that the evidence was flimsy at best. She was young, black, and poor, and to many that was proof enough. Maya's world was crumbling, and she could feel something bigger at play, forces she didn't understand, determined to crush her before she even had a chance to speak. And the man she'd tried to help, he was nowhere to be found. No one would say where he was, or even confirm if he was alive. She was alone, trapped. And as the investigation tightened around her, it became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a setup. Maya sat alone in a cold, dimly lit interrogation room. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every second, echoing her racing heartbeat. Hours had passed without answers, only accusations. The detectives circled her like vultures, twisting her words, insisting she confess. They showed her grainy footage of her walking down the street, clutching the brown paper bag, as if that proved anything. When she asked for a lawyer, they laughed. When she asked to see her grandmother, they ignored her. News headlines outside the station spun a different story. Teenage girl robs local businessman. Good Samaritan becomes suspect. Her face was plastered across every screen, her life reduced to a narrative written by strangers. No one mentioned her honor roll grades, her part-time job, or her kindness. No one mentioned she'd given away her own dinner. Then, the final blow came. A guard entered, whispering something to the detectives. One of them leaned forward with a smirk. "You're not going home tonight," he said coldly. Maya felt her body go numb. The room spun as they fingerprinted her, photographed her, stripped away her identity. By the time they led her to a holding cell, whispers from the officers followed her like daggers. Comments about her race, her type, and how she fit the description. In that moment, Maya realized this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. This was about power, about perception, about a system built to break her before she even had a chance to fight back. And as she sat on that cold metal bench, her hands trembling, a terrifying question gripped her chest. What if no one came to save her? 2 days later, the truth came out, but only because the man Maya had helped spoke up. The homeless stranger was indeed a millionaire, but he wasn't robbed. He'd slipped into an alley to avoid paparazzi, dressed down to escape attention. Maya had been the only person to show him kindness. Horrified by her arrest, he demanded her release, but the damage was already done. Maya walked out of jail, with swollen eyes, a shattered reputation, and a heart weighed down by fear she'd never known before. The news barely corrected its headlines. The officers who humiliated her faced no real consequences. For her, every glance from a neighbor, every whisper at school was a reminder that her innocence hadn't mattered. She'd been guilty the moment they saw her skin color. Maya went back to her life, but nothing was the same. She avoided walking home alone, flinched at flashing lights, and carried herself with a heaviness no teenager should bear. What haunted her most wasn't the arrest. It was realizing how easily her life could have ended that night. Stories like Maya's aren't rare. They happen every day, often without cameras, without justice, without someone powerful to step in. And for countless others, the ending is far worse. So ask yourself, how many more lives have been shattered by suspicion and prejudice? How many more stories go untold because no one believes them? If this story moved you, share it, speak out, because silence is how injustice wins, and empathy is how it ends.